Today on Country Pocket, we're here with Creekbed Carter Hogan. The new album is called Creekbed Carter. How are you doing today?
I'm all right. I just wrestled my cats for a biscuit that I'm trying to finish. So that's what's happened for me today.
They wanted your biscuit.
They did. They wanted it. And it's not even it's like a fine biscuit. I wouldn't give it a lot of stars, but they were insistent. So
I think you should have just given them the biscuit.
but then where does it stop? Then where does it end? If it's one biscuit, then what else? These cats, they take. I love them, but they take.
That's true. Before we get started, what pronouns do you use?
He, they for me, thanks. How about you?
I'm just regular old T him. No
That's
fun, no.
they're all regular. Turns out they're all super regular.
The first song we just heard was If I Was. Tell me about feeling valued.
Feeling valued. Okay, yeah. So that's a great way to phrase that question. So I wrote that song like from a very personal place first, which was about trying to grapple with the relationship that I have with my family, my father in particular, which is very like based on an exchange of goods, like a very capitalist relationship, essentially, where like as long as I am an object and a product that can perform and perform like do what he wants to do, be what he wants me to be, we have a relationship. But when I'm not doing those things, there is no value for me. Like I run out of value in our like relationship system. And so that's like a very like cold way to describe it. And it's a cold feeling actually. And what I've found through performing it is that that song in particular asks a lot of questions about like how we let capitalism into our relationships, how capitalism does affect us. Like if we were objects that never had need like didn't have needs that performed perfectly, there's this like idea that maybe like our society would reward us more, but it's a total fallacy, right? And so I think that question of being valued is really interesting because it's something to seek, and it's also something that isn't given in the current system that we live in, and we're watching that play out. We're watching that dehumanization and that devaluation play out politically, like across the world, here in the United States, in all of our oppressive systems we live with. So it's yeah, being valued is the biggest question, right? What is the value of human life? What is the value of labor? What is the value of relationship? What is the value of our humanity? And what price do we put on it? And when can we be bought out? These are like my biggest questions. And I think that's what I'm trying to ask with that song. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me in particular if you're talking about your father being the type of guy who really, above pretty much everything else, will value a gun. I mean, what
Yeah.
room, what room does valuing a gun leave for the value of human life, especially a human life that might be different than he was intending for it to turn out?
Yeah, it's that exact question also. I mean, so I'm not from Texas, but I've lived there for like 12 years. I've spent the majority of my adult life there. And even like on that scale, that's the question that gets asked, right? Is like how often Texas as a state values gun rights over the rights of human lives. Um, yeah, it's like pretty heavy and intense, and I think like writing it was a really hard but also effortless experience. Like it sort of came out fully formed, but it's really through performing it and like watching other people receive it and react to it that I've been able to actually ask bigger, more interesting questions about value, like what we're talking about, to like look at the bigger question and not just think about my own very micro lens of like my own life. It's been really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, Texas in particular is a great example guns have naturally endowed rights, but maybe not so much for queer people.
Maybe not. You know what? You can take queer out of it, actually. I think it comes down to guns versus people. I mean, Texas has had, it's really tough to look at like Uvalde, for example, which if you're like not familiar, that's like a we're really getting into it in this particular conversation. So Uvalde was a mass school shooting that happened like under the watch of the cops. They like watched it happen. No one went in to sit, like parents were going into an active shooting situation to retrieve their children because the cops were not responding that way. Um, and none of that led to gun reform, in spite of the people demanding it, in spite of that being actually the majority opinion that there needs to be gun reform, that there needs to be better laws protecting people against gun violence. That's not something that played out because the state of Texas, the government of Texas, does not value its people. Um, it's yeah, so it's really it's I feel like very honored when people talk to me about that song like after shows or like in my DMs and stuff. It like brings up stuff for all of us, and I am like honored to be the one that's like engaging with people on that topic because it's hard to talk about and it's hard to look at. Yeah.
We're gonna move to Lord Make Me a Scorpion, one where you sort of seem to be finding that every creature, every force of nature has a certain value, a certain thing you can peel from it. So does everything have some intrinsic value?
What do you mean? Like, what do you mean by value? Like, what's the question we're asking?
Like, does everything have something worth taking away from it and saying, yeah, that's worth emulating, that's worth learning from, that's worth having?
Do you think so?
I think a lot of things do, even if the lesson is don't do that.
Okay, yeah. So there's like a question of lesson versus like I'm trying to I think I one thing I'm asking for myself a lot is like what is the difference between something having value and something being able to teach me or give me something? Like where do we separate out the personal like that's something I can take from it versus everything has value even if it has nothing to do with me? I think that question is really interesting to ask, especially in this particular moment. Like can we still I guess yeah, like are all things worth protecting even if I personally can't get anything from it? It's like a huge question. It's the maybe one of the most important ones to ask. I think in that song yeah, that's what I'm trying to ask it as well. Like okay, I'm trying to get things out of understanding like what I wish I was versus what I am, or like please make me like this thing, make me like these entities so that I can better pass through the world, but also like even when they have nothing to do with me, what does value mean then? Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a look into your head that you can see a tumbleweed, a thunderstorm, a scorpion, and go, yeah, I see something in there that for me. Like, how do you look at these things that, I mean, at least in the case of scorpions, rattlesnakes, thunderstorms, are objectively not particularly safe for humans, and say, that's something I wish I could be. That's something I wish I could have.
I feel really, really grateful to have been a person who encounters other people that have taught me to see like beauty and communication and language and interest and value in everything, regardless of like my own safety and in relation to them. I think like a lot of that is like indigenous knowledge. I think a lot of it is like non-white Western knowledge. Uh, like I know like as a white person who grew up in Oregon, there were like animals that were good and animals that were bad, and you're like afraid of the bad animals and you like protect the good animals. And like through encountering people and works like by Robin Wall Kimmerer or by like my friend Hooli, who is like this incredible, I think the word is arachnologist, at Harvard. Like these people have taught me a lot about um, like just trying to understand like what we're looking at, regardless of whether or not it's going to be okay for me to have to be in relation with it. And so when I like talk about when I think about scorpions or rattlesnakes, they're like extremely beautiful objectively. They're so interesting, they're so resilient, they're able to do so much. Did you know rattlesnakes can swim? Do you know that?
That seems like a skill I wouldn't imagine a desert creature to have.
I watched them do it. I was in northern Texas on my friend's beautiful farm, and I was like in the river, and I watched rattlesnakes sort of cling to the side of this river and swim through it and sort of stay in the roots, and wait it out, like wait for some fish to come or like something. It was incredible. It was so beautiful. It was like extremely terrifying also because I don't want to get bit by snakes. I don't want to die. I'm not interested in that. But understanding them as this uh, this creature that swims, that goes through desert life, that like finds ways to move through the world in spite of human beings sort of hunting them down or like or seeing them as dangerous and reacting violently. Like they are able to withstand and survive so much, and that I think is like I think when we try to understand things like that, that seem dangerous, there's just so much beauty and like especially for someone as especially for a person who is marginalized in society, even with all of my privileges that I am surrounded by and very grateful for. I like still need help looking at the world. I still need help understanding like what place I could have in it and whether or not I can ever fit. And I think looking at entities like non-human and human entities who are so clever and resilient and curious. I think being curious about the world is how you find value in everything, even when it may not pay out for you in the end.
All right. If you could, from that song, pick one of those powers to actually be endowed with, which would you pick?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, oh man, I'm going through them all. I'm like, which one? It's toss up. I think it's a toss up. Um, I love the idea of being a tree at all. That's like something I think a lot about. I think about the language of trees, and I think about trees communicating and like their text, which is illegible to human beings often. Until recently, I guess we're starting to understand more, but very legible to themselves. And so I think like to be a juniper tree would be so good to stand alone on a mountainside, but not so alone, right? It's like the beautiful thing about the idea of being alone is that it's false and a myth. You're never alone. And so that's interesting. But I think probably I'd go with thunderstorm. Um, Turning rage into mercy seems like an important skill.
Yeah, certainly maybe seems more on the important end than the useful for ourselves end, but go with
Maybe. I mean, I have a lot of rage and not a lot of places to put it, and transforming it into mercy could be something. Could be something.
all right. We're gonna hear Lord Make Me a Scorpion. We're gonna be right back.